What's up, everyone? Welcome to Level 7. It is time for another edition of the Agents of Fandom podcast. There's so much going on right now. We have episode 4 of Loki, just an absolute chaotic banger. We have the Marvels coming up, but sometimes something comes that is just so good, so incredible, the talk of the internet, that you have no choice but to record another episode to talk about it. And that was the case with Spider-Man 2, Insomniac Spider-Man 2 for PS5. I spent my whole time streaming it, and I got 3 people with me who also played through the entire game at a quicker pace than I did, and I know I had a hell of a good time. First up, my co-host, as per usual, my guy, Adam Blevins. How you doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm so happy that when I pitched this to you guys, it didn't take much convincing from any of you, because I think, for me, as soon as I started playing this game, pretty quick, I was like, wow, I got to get in front of a mic and talk about how fucking awesome this is and how much I love this. And I think we are all of the same mind of that. So I can't wait. I just can't wait to talk about this for 30 minutes or 4.5 hours. I think it'll depend on if you guys cut me off or not.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. You know, we are recording as we talk about this. We're going to be live for our Loki episode 4 breakdown about 3 hours from now. So as long as we can keep it under 3 hours, I think we're gonna be a-okay. Next up, we got the director of social media and so much more, one of the top writers at Agents of Fandom, taking a long hiatus from his from being on a podcast, but he's back. Ryan Cortero, ready to talk Spider-Man 2 with us. How you doing?
I'm doing well. I mean, similar sentiment to Adam. I mean, this felt like a good time for me to get back into podcasting a little bit. And I mean, yeah, Spider-Man 2 is we got lots to talk about today.
Yeah, we do. It's such an incredible game. Finally, the host of the Agents of Fandom Comic Corner, where you can find some of the very biggest comic creators in the industry hopping on. Damon Gray. I was going to call you Damon Tweet. How you doing, buddy?
You always do that. Always do that.
I'm a visual person.
Yeah, you just see that name pop up in the chat all the time. You're like, yeah, it's just Damon Tweet.
Doing great.
How you doing?
Doing great. Very, very tired in a new corner, as you can see, a much bigger corner. So that's been my life the last few days, and hopefully we'll get some of the usual stuff behind me.
So, Damon, I feel like each of us were lucky enough to basically just lock ourselves in a room and dive into this game. You were doing it in the midst of a massive move. You bought a new house. You're moving into it basically the same weekend that Spider-Man 2 comes out. What was your experience like playing this game? Were you able to separate the exterior stress and dive in?
Chaos, baby. Gotta love chaos, you know? Yeah, it was fun, you know? You just kind of... I was up at midnight when it dropped. Was able to do that. Played it for about like a few hours, and then woke up at like 7 a.m. after that. And then after that, you know, just played it for as long as I humanly could until I needed a lunch break. Took about a 30-minute lunch break, came back. So I finished it. Ideally, I could have done it in like, the 14 hours total, but I was able to finish it, and it was a delightful time.
Ryan, you also stayed up nice and late, I believe, to get it done. Your Eastern time. It's a late night, but I believe, if I'm not mistaken, once this game came out, you were basically just going start to finish as much as you could.
Oh yeah, similar to Damon, I stayed right up till 12 Eastern. I played for about 2.5 hours. Woke up around 7ish and kept playing till about lunch that time. So that's on like another 5 hours. I played continuously that Friday night, going into Saturday morning. It was basic. I basically finished the game Sunday evening, I want to say. So it took me about like 3 days to do that, and then go fully platinum with it on the Monday. So yeah, it was a busy weekend, gotta say.
We got to give ourselves a little name. We're the Platinum Club or something like that, since we all 100%ed it. But Adam, what did you?
I don't do platinum. I don't do
This
plat. I do
guy.
He doesn't
story.
do
I do
platinum.
story. Story is the most important thing to me. I finish the story and then I put the game down.
Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing with this game is very different from the first two I've noticed. Is you can platinum it only like it's you only are really doing stories because each thing that they have towards the percentage in this game, they don't just have regular crime as part of it anymore. That's not part of the completion
Yeah.
percentage, and so it just all of the little side missions. So there is story that bring along with it. But Adam, I want to throw it to you. Did you stay up late for this one? I know you you're waking up at 4 in the morning to go to the gym to go to work like a crazy AE person. What was your time period of playing this game like?
Well, I pretty much planned my whole weekend, as I think a lot of people did, around this game. So Friday I was off work and I did still get up and go to the gym. But yeah, Thursday night I stayed up until midnight, which it helped that I saw Killers of the Flower Moon on Thursday night from 1 in the afternoon to about 9 o'clock at night because that's such a long movie. No, but the Killers of the Flower Moon took up a whole lot of my evening, and then I came home and only had to wait up for about an hour and a half. And yeah, I was like you guys, I was up for a couple hours playing, and then off work Friday. I got up, went to the gym, went and got some breakfast at about 8 or 9 o'clock. Came home at 10, and then similar to the TVA, all of a sudden, time works differently in the TVA. I sat down, and then next thing I know, it was like 8 o'clock at night, and I hadn't gotten up out of my chair, I hadn't eaten, I hadn't done anything. I was just completely locked in. I couldn't quit playing this game. I mean, it's pretty rare for me that I plan my whole schedule and stay up till midnight and just completely like take a couple of days off work and do this. The last game I did it for has been around a year ago, which was God of War Ragnarok. But it's like maybe one game a year that does this to me. But even like thinking back the last 3 to 4 years, I can't think of a game that I had as much fun playing as this one. I mean, everything like you guys all said, the story, the gameplay, all that stuff, which we're gonna go into in detail, but I just kind of kept playing, waiting to find something that I didn't love. And like, while there was like a few teeny tiny, like minor things that, I mean, I guess like just for the sake of having nitpicks, like I kind of came up with, but I kind of just kept playing and just kept finding myself loving it progressively more.
What about the action did you like? Because this was a very different fighting style, whether it be with the symbiotes, with the web fighting was different. Miles's powers were significantly upgraded in terms of his electricity powers in this one. How'd you like the action, and how would you compare it to previous games?
Oh, well, you kind of answered the question right there. You were like, what did you like so much about it, and what was different? Is this like we've got all these new powers, one with between the symbiote, the spider arms, and then all these new. I'm not sure. I can't remember what they're called. The entanglement powers for Miles or whatever. When he kind of gets switched up with Mister Negative, that kind of add like an extra layer to it. But then this L1 R1 system I wrote about in my review up on agentsofandom.com. This L1 R1 system, it's just like the most efficient, fluent, and satisfying way of having combat. To where, like in the first game, they had all these like gadgets and stuff, but you had to like hold R1 and pull up like a wheel and kind of pause combat to like switch gadgets and do this. And I didn't really love that. I kind of found myself doing more like button mashing, just like spamming square and like using like regular web shooters and stuff like that. And I loved it in this game that they had all these gadgets and abilities that you could use without like stopping combat, and that you didn't have to like really even choose. I mean, you had like you could go back and use some of Miles' old powers, but especially on like a first playthrough, you're like, I don't want to use the old stuff. I want to use this new stuff that's just now being presented. Like I know how to Venom punch people, but I'm still figuring out the chain lightning. So it's like I don't want to go back and use that. So they're just like it was so satisfying too to as you progress and unlock more skills and upgrade these abilities and stuff to figure out like certain gadgets and abilities pair really well together and certain ones might not be as much. Like some enemies are easier to parry and that like I don't know. They just like they knocked it out of the park with all these additions, like the combat. And we're going to talk about the traversal and stuff a little bit too. But I mean, yeah, the combat was such an upgrade. It was just like giving us all new because I was another person too that I felt like Peter really had to be upgraded for this game because after playing the first game and then we get to play as Miles, like for me personally, it was so much more fun for me to play as Miles with all the Venom powers and stuff as opposed to just like the gadgets. And I was like, I mean, I knew they were going to do something crazy with the symbiote, but then we get between the symbiote and the spider arms, new Venom powers. Man, it was perfect. Like they know they're cooking. They know exactly what the people want, and they gave it to us. It was perfect.
I have a bit of a hot take here, so I'm going to save myself for last. But Ryan, What did you think about the action here? How would you compare it to the other games? The one thing I'll say, Adam, that I very much agree with is the L1 R1 thing. It did make it really easy to bounce back and forth, and that was a very efficient style, like you mentioned, and I absolutely loved it. Ryan, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. The L1 R1 system's really convenient this time around. Instead of just like the L1 and the face button kind of, and having it. I know it's like when they first showed it, it looked a little jarring to have like the HUD system up, like just
Yeah.
actually seeing both of that. But I think it was kind of convenient. I didn't really find it distracting during combat because you're mainly focused on the action anyways. And it was just nice when you fill up that whole L1 R1 system, like just kind of having that visual to like, okay, this is what this power is, and so like if you're trying to get either pull in enemies or push them away, like like these are the different gadgets or powers that you could use for it. Um, I will say a lot of games are starting to do this now, and I'm personally not a fan of it. Is like a parry system. It's fun when it works. I think having this game focus a lot on it for specific missions or enemy types, I think was um, not for me. Where I think it's a nice tool to have, but to have it be a requirement basically for some different missions, like I think that's where I kind of draw the line. It's like how I feel about the web wings, where like I like the web wings, but like I don't always use them. But I'm glad that it's not necessary for the most part to use them unless you're doing like one of those
The
hunter
drones.
missions.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even then, it's not like you have to switch between it. It's like you're already flying. You don't have you just kind of have to stay within the flight path. But
It's almost like its own version of a spider bot thing. Like it's just a different style task.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I still enjoy the combat, and one of the things that I really enjoyed with this game following up the last two is like Peter and Miles are still as strong as they are at the peak of their games. It's just that now they elevated it, and that's one of like my criticisms with other games is where you feel like you're starting a new game, even though your character from a previous game was already super powerful. But here it just elevates their power even more. So I really enjoyed that. Like it wasn't just like start at square one. You have to relearn all these different skills. It's like what new skills can we throw in to make it more interesting for the player?
Well,
Yeah, I
the pair.
agree with.
I just want to say real quick too, the pairing system, like it's like satisfying when it works, but it's not very intuitive. Like
Yeah,
it seems so like the timing is so weird with different enemies, and like because you get like the white dodge thing will pop up and it's there for like 3 seconds and you're waiting, and then the red is just like comes and goes and it's gone. And I'm just like, it seems like it's just not like I don't know the system the way they did that. It was really satisfying. I found myself on my second playthrough like trying to hit a lot of parries, but then I'm just like I'm like halfway through and I still just can't figure it out. It's just not very intuitive. I don't know.
I also just like dodging so much better, but yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Ryan. Damon, what were your thoughts on the action compared to the other games? And I want you to touch on specifically as well. You mentioned on Twitter, you had a tweet about how you thought they solved with this game the biggest flaw from the previous games.
Yeah, I think a lot of people did not enjoy MJ's stealth missions very much in the previous game. They're fun once, but whenever you saw yourself going into that, you know, not first person, but like, behind her, and you're like, oh no. Oh no. Like you should never really feel that in a game. This time though, you get a nice Sable gun and she can fight back. And that was really satisfying because now instead of you're the predator in this scenario, instead of being the prey hiding, you are the predator going behind someone to give them a little tase in the back of the neck. Or eventually, it turns into an actual gun.
I love when you get to shoot them.
It's
Yeah, that's crazy.
man, I was never expecting that in a Spider-Man game, and it was so satisfying. It was so satisfying. So they did, in my opinion, fix that. The action itself, when you're Spider-Man, you're Spider-Man. You're gonna smash the square button like a billion times. Maybe you'll throw in some triangle button, you'll throw them up and slam them down. But after that, for me, action can get repetitive, especially when there's a lot of villains in the game and a lot of hunters you have to take down. So it can get a little repetitive for me.
I think I enjoy the gadgets and the fight. I agree that the fighting has improved so much from the first game to this one, from the L1 R1 style to just the improvements on dodging, the improvements on the action styles, different moves you can do, all of that. But I enjoy the gadgets the most from the very first Spider-Man game. I enjoy Peter's webs more than Miles' electricity in the second one, and more than his gadgets and arms in this one. The symbiote stuff was so cool. Miles' upgrades in this one were so cool. I do love the electric thing just because I love electric powers as well. But I actually enjoy Peter more in the first one outside of symbiote stuff than I did in this one. I love the web gadgets. I love the impact web. I love everything that they had on there. They were just like all my favorite web styles, and so I did kind of miss that for him, but getting the symbiote kind of eliminated that, and it did make it so wildly fun. We talked a little bit about traversal. Ryan, you kind of gave your take on the web wings and stuff already. If you have something else, feel free to chime in. But Damon, I'll go to you on this one. What did you think of the addition of the web wings? And I mean, if you have a take on fast travel, whatever, because they really kind of upped a few things for this.
Well, if you fast traveled, shame on you in this game.
You're a coward.
You're a coward. You can go from one side of the city to there in like 90 seconds at, the longest in this game, which is phenomenal, by the way. When they first announced the web wings, I was not a fan. I'm like, man, I'm Spider-Man. I don't want to be flying around a city. I want to be swinging around a city. And then I started doing the flying around the city and catching the wind tunnels. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, man, this is really cool. I can really get a Superman game out of this, or man, I can really get a good Iron Man game out of this, because that to me saw the potential of that. That's where my brain was at. But it was way more satisfying than I imagined it to be. And I didn't think it would be as hands off. Also, you can get in a wind tunnel, you can just sit back, and that to me, that was fast travel. That that was way. They actually did a good job. It did like one fast travel just so I could see that cutscene. That wasn't even a cutscene. It's just fluid, right? This to me, I mean, this was also fluid, but this is just a little more satisfying. You're going through the city. It's almost like taking the subway itself, but in the air, and you're just kind of like going back and you're just watching the city go by.
Very, very reminiscent to the Batman Arkham games with the way he flies through there. Adam, what did you think of the web wings and the different traversal methods in the new game?
Oh, this was my favorite part of the game, like Damon, and I think like a lot of people, I was really skeptical about the web wings and all this stuff because I see it and I'm like, no, like the swinging is the best part of these games. I don't want to be flying, like I want to swing. And then you start using them, and then especially for me, I was like, I found myself just over and over and over again. Like I would get to the top of a building and do the slingshot, like the L2X slingshot launch, just as hard as I could, and then flat out right into the web wings, into a wind tunnel. And then they also had that new ability where you dive and then you hold the right trigger instead of letting it go, and you can swing in like circles, and it's like really increasingly more fast, and then take off. Oh my god, it was so fun just swinging around the city. I kept choosing, when I would pull out the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man app, I would choose the farthest location away just so I could like travel more and spend more time with the web wings and swing and stuff. And I also love that they gave Peter, for when you are still swinging, which is still a lot, they gave Peter some really, really cool acrobatic new animations. Because one other thing that's like, when I'm going back and playing the first game, like after Miles Morales came out, like Peter swinging felt kind of like white bread a little bit, like compared to Miles, who's like swinging backwards and with his head like straight down, all this crazy stuff. And then you go to Peter, who just has like the same 3 animations that he does the entire game. So I'm really, really glad they kind of upgraded that for him. But I mean, the traverse, this is the one thing where I'm like, I just don't know how they go up from here in the inevitable 4th game, whatever's next. Like, I just can't. I mean, I'm sure they'll find a way, because they always find a way, because Insomniac's incredible. But like, I can still think of plenty of things for combat, customization, the story, like places they can go up. But then for like traversal, I don't know how it gets any better and any more satisfying than this, because between the web wings and all these different new abilities, like I just would find myself sometimes swinging across the city and just doing crimes for like 15 or 20 minutes without even picking up on like any kind of objective, because I was just having so much fun like getting around. It was incredible.
Damon, you looked like you had something.
I mean, we can get into this when we get into the story, but I have an idea. That'd be traversal. It would be kind of fun.
Let's start diving into that story. Ryan, I want to throw it to you first here for it. I personally this was my favorite story of all of the three so far. One of the reasons I love it so much is because I'm such a fan, and we'll get more into this, Adam, when you and I talk about Loki episode 4 in a bit, but I'm such a fan of not knowing what the hell is going on. I love it. I have no I can't help but theorize, speculate. I had no idea what was going on throughout most of this. Like, obviously, you can follow it at times, but it was almost Invincible esque the way you would be following this story, and then they would just throw something at you like, "Oh my god!" Ryan, what did you think of the story? How would you compare it to the other ones? What were the hardest hitting moments for you?
So man, I mean, when we learned more about this game, like that Craven and Venom would be a thing, I think most of us kind of were on the same page of like, okay, Craven's gonna be the boss for the most part. Then Venom's gonna come in. We're gonna have a we're gonna have a Miles versus Symbiote Peter fight. They're gonna make up, team up against Venom, and that's kind of like the layout of it. And that's kind of what it is, but it's the way the emotional depth throughout the whole story, how that was handled, was like so much better than the last two games, in my opinion. Because you could say like this and the first Spider-Man game were kind of the same, where it's like Martin Lee's the villain for most of it, and then you have Doc Ock and the other villains at the end of that. Um, but this one, it's like it's just layered with different emotional beats with with Harry, with Miles's own journey with Martin Lee, and it doesn't feel like one. Well, in a little bit, like Peter's story's kind of taking over, but it's Miles still has his journey, regardless of what Peter's going through. Like Miles is on this kind of dark path, and that honestly shocked me a little bit more because I was like, okay, we're leading Miles down this dark path, and we know that Peter's gonna go down this dark path with the symbiote. So it's like, who's gonna be taking care of the other, and like, will both of them kind of do like the darkest thing they could ever do? So that was pretty interesting to me. But I think what elevates this game over the last two even more is like the side missions and just friendly neighborhood Spider-Man missions in general. Like I think most of us can say like the one with the missing grandfather was like super touching. It's not really necessary to the story at all, but like just having that scene with with Peter finding the grandfather and what that meant. And even there's the side mission with Haley, and it's like the audio's cut out and everything, and just seeing her, what she does on a daily basis as an artist, and her influence on other artists. It's like it did not need to be. Every mission hit emotionally, and like the Sandman one especially, and it's just like the writing. I don't know what they like, how many writers they had, who they got, but like it's tremendous to see like that they made each mission matter in some way. It didn't feel like anything was insignificant or something was like skippable, in my opinion.
We don't need to one compare it, but something I want to add into your everyone's thoughts on the story is, where would you compare this Spider-Man story 1 to 3, or I guess 1 to 1.5 to 2 of these games that we've seen, among other Spider-Man stories you've seen, whether it be on live action movies, animated cartoons? Damon, I'd love if you could kind of compare it to some of your favorite comic runs, maybe. But like, to me, as like, Spider-Man's my favorite superhero. Ryan, I believe he's yours too, is he not?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Like, this is, I think, maybe the best Spider-Man story since the beginning of the first game that I've witnessed in my life. Like, what are your takes on that, Ryan, before we get everyone else's thoughts on the entire story?
Oh god. That's tough. Like I as like yeah, no, as I was playing it, I was like thinking this is what it does with the mythos. I mean, especially around the whole Venom of it all. Like it definitely does take some, it definitely changes some things, but I think with with the knowledge I have, I don't, I haven't read as much as the more recent comics, especially the Venom ones that they're taking inspiration from. I know, it's a different take with what they do with Harry. But I think I really enjoyed seeing that aspect of Harry. And I mean, as much as it is like a Miles and Peter game, there's a lot with Harry, and I think they could have expanded on it. But I think this is like for sure my favorite Craven. I can say that. Um, I think I mean like it's so hard because of the Spider Verse movies in general because of how much they were able to encapsulate with different like a whole different ensemble and such a big ensemble in those movies and still make it work. I think this one still feels personal with big stakes, but nothing too grand for like a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I would say. So I think in that sense, where it's like the perfect level of like stakes for Spider-Man, like this is right up there with like some of the best. I don't really know what else I really compare it to because like yeah, the like the '90s Spider-Man was just covered so much in that time. But I mean, this is also just one game. Like this specific game alone covers already so much, and it could have done more, and it's leading us to more. But yeah, I don't. I think as of right now, like I can't really think of anything other like Spider-Man content wise like that tops it.
It's just like it feels like there's a standard that's been hit with things like Across the Spider Verse and a couple others, and this is one of them. This is one of the ones that is like it set a standard. Adam, what did you think about the story? What were some of your favorite aspects, whether it be a twist you didn't expect or something that made you cry? For me, like this one didn't quite have a Aunt May dying moment of like
Yeah.
I'm just bawling at my screen right now, but still there were so many incredible emotional beats.
Oh yeah, well, like the story. I mean, you guys have all touched on it really well. The story is great, and I think the biggest surprise for me, I'm very fortunate, as I think we all are, that we didn't have anything spoiled for us. At least I know I didn't. And the screen, like a lot of the, so I read a whole lot of the reviews when the early reviews when they first came out. I think the week before, right around a week before the game, and the only like consistent ding on all of them, and this was like it was a minor ding, like it's like instead of 5 stars, maybe it's 4.7, 4.8. Is that this story, and you touched on this a little bit too, Ryan, is very similar in structure to the first one, like with Martin Lee and Craven, and then we switch over to Otto and Venom. But like, and while that is the case, one, that's okay because it works remarkably well in the first game as it does here. So that's like it's fine to stick with something like that when it works this well. But like you said, TJ, the stakes and everything feels so much more intense, and like everything is just so much more important in the Harry stuff. Shout out to I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the guy that does the mocap and the voice stuff for both Harry and Norman in this game were absolutely incredible, especially Harry. Like I really felt like I, one of my biggest concerns going into the game was like, okay, we've heard Peter do all this talking about Harry, like and how they're best friends and stuff, but like I don't know how invested. Like I'm much more invested in Peter and Miles because I've seen that like progress through 2 games, and I'm like I don't know how I'm going to feel about like this new guy coming in and just being Peter's best friend. But like I really bought into it. Like I could tell, and I think they kind of established that pretty quick with that mission at Midtown High. The two of them, going and scrambling together and finding all this stuff and running from the security. Like, that was just like another mission where I'm like, okay, well, these are like regular people. I know we're doing some spider stuff too, but this is just great. Like all those missions that we weren't Spider-Man 2 were just great to me. But as far as ranking it among other Spider projects, see this is difficult because if you count these 3 games, even like just main story, we probably have what like 50, 60 hours of content versus like any one movie like Toby has like 6 or 7 hours, Andrew has like 4 hours. So it's like it's hard to compare that amount because like everything is obviously so much more fleshed out here just because we get to see so much of what these characters are about that you don't get in a movie or a TV show. But I mean, if I had to rank it for me, and now my experience ends with live action and video games, and as we all remember, most of the earlier video games, excluding things like Web of Shadows, were centered around the movies and kind of followed like a similar storyline to those. Like they had the Andrew Garfield Spider-Man games, even though the character looked nothing like Andrew Garfield. And then they had like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man games. So I believe Toby actually voiced Peter Parker and Spider-Man in those games, but still they just followed like a pretty similar story. It's been a long time since I played them, so I could be off on that, but if I remember correctly, they follow like a really similar story to what happens in the movies. But overall, this would definitely be one for me. And like as somebody who I didn't know anything about Miles Morales when the first game came out, and I believe the first game came out right around the same time as Into the Spider-Verse. I think it was 2018 range. And then like getting to learn more about Miles and watching that movie, Miles quickly became my favorite Spider-Man, like more so than Peter. I don't know, Miles with his powers, and also I just think he's got a little bit more depth to him. I think I don't know though. That's a really complicated conversation. But the story itself was just like it was a masterpiece, man. They couldn't have really developed it any better. And I don't know if we're gonna talk about more about side stuff going forward, but yeah, they nailed all the side stuff too by making it feel really important, and sometimes having it even kind of tie into the story, some of the stuff that you were doing, and also lead into kind of future projects. But story wise, like narrative side or main, I thought like no complaints, man. They absolutely knocked it out of the park.
Damon, what were your thoughts on the main story? What stood out for you? Do you have any qualms, or was it all just beautiful?
So I am story first when it comes to these games all the time. Like if you look at me and when you asked about the action before, I put my difficulty on 0 because I am story first. That's how I am. That's how I enjoy my games. And I'm not ashamed of that by any means. So I go into this just trying to be like, I want to soak it all in. There's so much with this that I loved. First, one of the things early on that really caught my eye, like the design that they gave high school Peter Parker was perfect. Yeah. Like I saw that design and was like, oh my, this is Peter. Like this is Peter Parker. This is perfection right here. Even down to like the little side mission with Black Cat sneaking into the Sanctum Sanctorum to steal the Wand of Watum. And it was like that little thing is just pulled essentially straight out of Jed McKay's Black Cat run. And I thought for a second we were going to play as her trying to go in and do a stealth mission, but we didn't. Which is fine. Most of everything went to story that they take lenience with, I was totally cool with because they did it well. Harry becoming Venom, they did it well. They did it so well because we've seen, everyone been here has seen a bunch of iterations of Harry becoming the Goblin eventually or something along the lines of that, where he's sick and this is the only thing that can save him. It's like, but what about this? We haven't done this yet, which is kind of crazy because it's like we've never done this yet, and it worked so well. My only qualm, since you want me to point one out, MJ becoming Scream came out of absolute nowhere because Scream is a different symbiote. So I was like, how come she gets a special? Like, where did this little symbiote come from? But other than that, like in the moment, I was like, you know what? I don't care. This little moment right here is too cool for me to be nitpicking at. I was also slightly disappointed we didn't really truly get like a Null appearance, who's the he's the king of the symbiotes. You get the symbol freaking everywhere. It's on the meteor, but it was like, where's Null in all this? Are we getting a Null? Is Null a thing in this universe? Yes, no, I don't know, maybe. And yeah, I loved this story. It was just down to grassroots. The Kraven in this is one of my favorites, right up there with Marvel made an official podcast called Old Man Star-Lord, which is based out of the Wastelanders universe, which is a universe where the Avengers all died, essentially, because the Thunderbolts turned on them, and all the villains took over. And Kraven is still out there doing Kraven things, and Star-Lord essentially had to run away from Kraven at one point, and it was really, really, really well done. Like, that Kraven was perfect. This version of him is up there. I think it's hilarious that we're about to see a movie featuring Kraven, and we're going to be comparing it to this. This is the standard now for many people. Genuinely, for many people who possibly don't read comics, don't really know who Kraven is, or have a very loose adaptation of Kraven, this is their standard now. We're going to be getting what we saw in the trailer. that's going to be tough for a lot of people. I completely agree with Adam in terms of it's extraordinarily difficult to compare everything when we had 14, 15 hours just in the main story in this game compared to like a 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie to compare everything with. But it's very good, and you become attached to these characters a little more because you're playing them, right? Not just watching it. So it's different in terms of all three of them. I will say between the three games, this is my favorite story. It's not even close. And I also completely agree with you, TJ. I never really got that like punch in the gut moment like with Aunt May, but I never in the previous game had a jaw on the floor. Holy shit, they actually did it with Craven getting his head bit off by Venom, which is
That's
something that I kept telling
crazy.
myself. I was like, the only way they can like they're teasing Craven as a villain, but I was like, the only way they can really make Venom a badass in this is if he just kills him. And they did. Oh, and they did.
They did, and that was one of the. I agree. I haven't had a jaw-dropping moment like that, except for maybe 10 minutes earlier when they allow us to play as Venom. When they allow us to play as Venom, I'm just losing my shit on the stream. I'm getting so excited. When we were talking about the action earlier, obviously the Venom action was incredible, but I forgot to shout you out, Ryan, because my fighting sequences became a lot easier when I had you in the chat reminding me to hit my L3 and R3, because I would always forget to do my symbiote surge and my venom blasts, always forgetting. But the venom thing, both with him biting Craven's head off and us just becoming him, just shocked me, and I loved it. Same with the MJ Scream thing. I was just like, I think I got extra excited about that because I was sitting there through the whole game, and we're going to talk about side missions right away, but two things. I was like, these spider bots have to be Spider Society multiversal. And then the other thing was like, okay, are we going to get a Carnage tease? Are we going to get a Carnage tease? Are we going to get a Carnage tease? And so when I saw her, I actually thought that was our Carnage tease at first. I thought that was like oh, he's actually birthing his own first child, and that's Carnage, and it's going to be Lady Carnage. Like, that's what I was thinking there.
I thought originally when Craven bit you as like when you had the symbiote on, I was like, this is how Carnage is gonna be it, and Carnage is gonna be Craven. Well.
And that can take us. I mean, I guess my one qualm of the story would have been I'd have loved to see some more Black Cat. But in addition to that, like, let's go right into our favorite side missions, and I'll go first because I'm sitting there through this. This was just a masterpiece in storytelling because I'm going through this entire game sitting, but where's Carnage? But where's Carnage? Because Carnage is my favorite Spider-Man villain. I love that the concept of Peter Parker is always wanting to rehabilitate his villains. With great power comes great responsibility. I beat them not with brawn, because a lot of them are stronger than me like Venom, but with my brain. It doesn't fucking work against Carnage. None of it works against Carnage because all he wants to do, he's not in it for any ulterior motive other than to just cause chaos. It's like Alfred says in the Batman movies, referencing the Joker, some men just want to see the world burn, and that's Carnage. And they took that literally throughout this side mission with the cult people with the flames. They're trying to set all of New York on fire. They're talking about their day of reckoning and their prophecy, and it's revealed at the end that I don't know why. I was so focused on other things. I don't know why it didn't click in my head that this dude with red hair, who they are not giving a name, is probably fucking Cletus Cassidy. But it didn't even enter my head once until that final mission where he starts pulling something out and Ryan's saying, like, TJ, you should probably go finish this mission. And I'm like, okay. And so I go finish that mission, and there is the Carnage tease. It was Cletus Cassidy all along. By far my favorite side story of the group. I thought it was incredible. Adam, of all the individual side plot, side missions, what was your favorite?
That's same exact one for many of the same reasons that you just said. I felt the same. I didn't pick up on it, and then it was like as soon as they say it, they're like the flame known aliases, Cletus. I was like, I did like the Leo point meme. I was like, oh, that makes so much sense now. Why did I not pick up on that? But like, that
He
was
loves
really, really incredible.
explosions too. That's his thing.
Right.
Cletus Cassidy loves explosions.
And like for that, and also I know you were disappointed by this, but like the Spider-Bot one for me was really, really cool because Ryan, you and I talked about this before. I think either one of us had finished the game. That one of my predictions for the next game, I don't want to bury the lead, get too ahead of myself here, but was that I think we'd see several different iterations of Marvel's New York, like maybe a 2099 version, maybe an animated version, something like that. But those were my two guesses, like particularly like a 2099 and an animated version. And then we open that portal and we see like like a part of an animated world, and I'm like, I was right. I bet we get a third. Like I still very well could not be right. That in no way, that little portal and Delilah, I think was her name, is no way proof that we're getting a full animated world. But I'm going to take it as that. I'm going to take that and say I was right. We're getting a full animated world. We may even get to play as Miguel, more spider people. Spider Verse, across the Spider Verse story, beyond the Spider Verse story is going to tie directly into Spider. That's where my brain is at with all this because it's like although that one little mission, like just that little payoff, wasn't very much. Like it was pretty much just her saying, like if I remember correctly, oh yeah, Miguel was looking for these or whatever. But it's like the potential, the possibility of what that could mean for me as soon as I saw it was like with this tying into those movies. Now I know that adds like a whole several other layers of complexity to this that also kind of set it up, I think, for more like potential failure. But I trust them at this point. We have no reason not to try. Like both franchises are batting a perfect like percentage right now. They're crossing into and across the Spider Verse, perfect. These three games all perfect to me. So I'm like, I don't know why I'm even worried about them potentially crossing over because they're just like 5 for 5 on all this. But I don't know. For me, it was probably as excited as I was about the Carnage one. Just for I guess just for the sake of being different, I'll say it was the Spider Verse or the Spider Bots one for me because like I kind of knew that was coming. You know, there was a lot of like I don't even know if you call it leaks or reporting or speculative report, whatever it was that like there were going to be Spider Bots that were kind of like multiversal tie-ins. That was like a conversation surrounding this game, building up to it. But then we finally get that, and I'm just like my mind started racing like the guy in front of the board pointing at all the crazy writing behind them. I was like, what this could mean, the stuff they could do with this is just like limitless potential. And also, it's like nice to just 100% confirm like that was absolutely one of the spotlight. Is then that portal opened. They didn't make it look any different. They didn't give it some other weird thing to be ambiguous about. That was 100% like one of the Spider Society bracelets, like portals. Which I was just like, okay, like they're gonna do it. Like I feel like they have to. After doing that, there's no way that could just be some little thing that they don't pay off. Like I'm most excited about that one because of what I think it means going forward, which is just like crazy multiversal mayhem in the third and however many more games they want to make.
And I think it confirms that this takes place before Across the Spider-Verse because obviously we see him in that game, and I hope you're absolutely right because otherwise I think Peter being part of the Spider Society and him having his own Miles kind of creates a bit of a plot hole unless there's an explanation in Across the Spider-Verse, unless there's an explanation for that. And so I absolutely hope you're right on that one. Ryan, what was your favorite side missions? Was it one of these same two? I was personally underwhelmed with the Spider Bot one just because I thought we'd see a spider person and not Delilah. I don't know who the hell Delilah is, unless Delilah's like a part of Beyond the Spider Verse, and she's like, was she in Across? Damon, you look like you're gonna say something.
Isn't Delilah the AI?
That's Lila.
Lila.
Yeah.
Okay.
Delilah is in a deleted scene where the Spot goes to the bar with no name, and Delilah is the bartender there.
Oh.
So, when I saw it, I was like, oh, okay, this is like someone. And she's clearly in like the Spider Verse animation style, but like I was like, okay, I don't really get it. And yeah, the line about like, oh, if Miguel asks for these, tell him like finders keepers or whatever, something like that. And so I thought, oh, she's like working with him. But then now knowing that, like, because the bar with no name's like where the villains hang out. So it's like, oh, is she bad? Is like, what is she going to do with these spider bots? So I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the implications could be there. But yeah, I mean, that has me interested if they will actually follow up on it or if it's just a little like, hey, this does connect and that's it. I mean, I wouldn't be mad about it. I just wish that like we'll get a better explanation as to like how Insomniac Spider-Man can be in Across the Spider-Verse without even mentioning a Miles, even though this game takes place before that movie. So, I mean, we'll see. But in terms of side missions that I really enjoyed, I mean, you guys covered it with the Flame one, where when we when we first interact with like these cultists, it's just like cultists, and that's their like subtitle. And I was like, who are these people? Like, I don't remember this being established at all in the previous two games. And then when they talk about like their leader and everything, and then you kind of go down this path, you're like, okay, what is this about? And I was like confused of what villain this would just be, if this is just a new villain created for the game, or if they were like kind of doing their own take on a different villain. And then one of the greatest things I enjoyed about it was Yuri becoming Wraith officially in this game, because you see that, you see the relationship throughout the main game in the first one. Then in the DLC, you see her dark turn, and I think in the last chapter of that DLC, you like the side mission in that is like she leaves these crime scene tapes, very similar to how she is in the comics, with like the different raps that she has, and that's like part of her abilities. So seeing her, I mean, she doesn't have powers in this, but she like has like this scythe that she like kind of whips around, which it works for what this game is. It was cool to see you fight alongside with her, and then obviously eventually fight against her, and it felt real, like it like the that mission where you're fighting against her and they're going back and forth, which is funny because both of the voice actors are married in real life. So just having this little bicker moment between them of like Peter trying to convince Yuri, like, saving people matters, while Yuri's like completely this has like wants to kill criminals, which is kind of weird because when you do get to play this mission, like Peter has a symbiote, so it's a little jarring that like Peter's still for saving people, even though like he's already kind of down this dark path. But it was just nice to see like you team up with Yuri, and one of the cool things is that like even if you're fighting crime around the city, she is there too, whether you play as Peter or Miles. And it's kind of funny. I played it yesterday and that was the first time I got Miles and Yuri teaming up on regular crime stuff, and it's just like, oh ma'am, da da da, and she's like, don't call me ma'am, and it's just, I don't know, it's just funny to see this kind of interaction. And that's one of the cool things I really liked about this game in general, where yeah, you could just be fighting crime and a random hero will pop up, and I can't wait for the day where that hero will be like Moon Knight or Daredevil, or I mean,
Or
considering
the
we're
Avengers, because God, where the hell are they?
no, they can't. If they can't deal with symbiote Ness, they're not going to deal with petty crime. So
The funniest thing is too is
Would
that
you
like
imagine? That would actually be amazing.
just Iron Man's like
yeah.
Thor just comes down, one big hammer throw, and is like, yeah,
Just on like one of those random like, oh my God, like one of those absolutely random bank robberies or whatever, like some convenience store getting held up, like the entire Avengers, and you're like, really?
Hulk just breaks the whole building. But
Yeah.
that was the stupidest part about those symbiote nests, is that they like the biggest conglomerate of them was right around Avengers Tower. There was like 3 to 4 of them like right within a mile of Avengers Tower on each side, and it's like,
my God.
can you guys not do anything? Like
They're off Earth. We're pulling a Captain Marvel here. They're off Earth.
Yeah, and
They're-
see the thing is too, you get that like when you do the Doctor Strange mission, and he's like, Wong's like, we owe you one. Nope, no follow through with that in this game. Apparently, like we know that you took care of it instantly. Like you get that note as soon as you finish the mission, and they're like, we owe you one. And then the rest of the game, nothing, no mention or whatever. I mean, I don't know.
DLC, baby. Give me my Black Cat DLC where we have to do something with Black Cat for Doctor Strange. I'll be happy.
And or what if he owes him one, and then that leads to how he meets up with the Spider Society through something a little multiversal that Doctor Strange helps him with. You never know. That might be too galaxy brain. Damon, if there's something in the side missions we haven't covered that you want to touch on, absolutely feel free. But actually, the biggest thing I want to question you on was, what was your take on to be have you finished the drone missions?
No.
Can I spoil something
That's
for
fine.
you?
That's
Okay. You know how so the drone missions, they're each time you finish one, it shows another face, and it's like, who the hell is this person? Sometimes they're dead, sometimes they don't even exist, and it's revealed that the drone who you're chasing, it was Craven hunting the chameleon. That is who he was chasing, and not only is it revealed that, but you finish it and you find out that the reason why Craven was hunting the chameleon was because they are brothers. And it is revealed that Craven the Hunter and the chameleon are brothers. And when you, sorry,
That's a thing.
perfect. Okay, that's what I wanted to know. Actually, was that a thing previously? And then it finishes out with him going, "Don't worry, brother. I will finish what you were unable to," because it happens after Craven's already dead. And so Chameleon is sitting there having a drink with some sunglasses on, watching you, Spider-Man, investigate his house and then have it almost blow up. And he's saying he's going to be there for next time. So that's what I was wondering is, does that have any comic precedence? And as we like go into next, transition here into what do we think could possibly be coming next for this game in Spider-Man 3. Obviously we know there's Carnage coming, obviously we know there's Green Goblin coming. I don't think this is going to be Spider-Man 3. I think this is going to be the game's DLC, and where we have to take down Chameleon. I think that would make a lot of sense because they can use all of the same henchmen, so they won't actually have to add that much. They're just adding on another story to it. Damon, what do you think about that kind of theory? And then hit us with the comic precedence for these two being brothers and having some interaction.
Well, you already kind of said it. That they have a familial connection. There you go. If that was a DLC, that'd be kind of cool. I mean, we do know that they have a precedent to have DLC in this game, so it's like usually 2 or 3 years, somewhere around there, for the Spider-Man games. So yeah, I'd be down with that. I'm always just trying to think of more stuff for these games and whether like certain pickup points will be focused on in a DLC or picked up later in the fourth game, I guess Spider-Man 3, with like a continuation on one of the stories, kind of like what they did with Wraith.
Mm-hmm.
Or we get like almost a Miles scenario and you have like a little in-between game featuring another character and you go from there. So it's like they have options.
My guess for the next, and the reason why I think this is going to be a DLC is because I think they've just set up too much for the next game for it to not be partially resolved beforehand. They have all these little things like you stroll by Nelson and Murdoch and it says that they've been evicted on it, and you get to meet up with Doctor Strange. You have the multiversal stuff, and then on top you have Chameleon, and on top of all these things you also have, my guess is Carnage is going to be the next Craven, and my guess is Green Goblin will be the next Venom. They'll do likely the same 2-tiered things again, and I think that's how it's going to be played out here. But Ryan, another thing that they unveiled in the second post-credit scene after Norman gives us the G Serum, that who knows, maybe this will be a DLC, or maybe this will be in Spider-Man 3 as well. Hell, maybe it'll be her own game. Cindy Moon was introduced into the Insomniac universe.
Ooh, oh boy. Oh my god. I mean, like, yeah. Oh my god. Okay. Let me try to wrap this. So it's just so funny that, like, I mean, you early on in the story, you know, Rio is talking about, oh, I'm seeing this guy, da da da. Like, oh, I want you to meet him. You know, kind of think nothing of it. Like, and then you get that follow up by the end of the game, like the very end of the game, which is like, okay, like they're going to be teeing up something here, but it's this long sequence of like Miles and Haley discussing their futures, and then yeah, you see Cindy Moon, you see the back of her head and you just see that her name is Cindy. And I mean, clearly, like, even if you don't know who that is, you're like, okay, this is clearly someone important. Which was interesting to see. I mean, the fact that they don't even show her face makes me think like whatever they have planned next for her is like way off. Because even I think one of the trailers for the first Spider-Man game, you already that it ends with like showing Miles's face, and they're like, "Oh, Miles," and then it cuts to black, and then that Miles is in the game and everything. But this one, it's like back of her head, it's Cindy. Doesn't even say Cindy Moon. So I hope we get to see more of her fairly soon, whatever comes next, because I think you have to establish a lot with her, and if you do that in like a game with Carnage and Green Goblin, I think she will kind of get like um, she won't be as big of importance in comparison to the main two heroes. So I hope. I mean, I don't know if they'll do it in DLC where like Miles and her are kind of hanging out a couple times and they interact. I mean, we don't even know like if she's gonna have like how she's gonna get her powers, if she maybe has her powers, because she's. I'm assuming she's roughly around Miles's age. I thank God that like she's not near Peter's, because if you know her history with Peter in the comics, those two don't need to be near each other at all.
We don't need that.
Um,
We don't need that.
yeah, and yeah, the original story is like she was bitten by the same spider that Peter got bitten by. So I don't think they're gonna go that route. They can't do that now. I don't know what. Yeah, so I'm just curious to see what they do with it, because like, you, I don't know, like you can't just have her get bitten.
This is going to be their biggest retcon they're going to have to do.
Yeah,
And I already, after watching everything and seeing everything that they've done with other characters, I trust them to give Cindy a proper, good backstory on how she gets her powers, because you don't give a tease like that if you're not giving a Silk in the end, right?
yeah,
And she's going to have, like, her powers work a little differently. Her webs come from her fingertips, not like web shooters. So it's natural. So it's a little different with her. So in the end, it's going to be a completely different backstory. I don't know how they're going to do it. I think that's going to be the most fascinating part. I don't even know if they know how they're going to do it yet, but they tease it.
right. Because like if they go like, oh, she was put in a bunker for like this many years.
No.
I don't think they will do that, because like her and her father seem to have a good relationship. But I don't know. I'm so curious to see what they do
Also,
with it.
R.I.P. her brother, who is, I guess, nowhere to be found in this.
Yeah,
We're just a
my
completely
only
different
kid,
Cindy Moon here.
Cindy. Yeah. So
That's what
yeah.
shocked me, is I was sitting there thinking that Rio's boyfriend was going to end up being like Miles's next villain or something like that. Like I thought it was going to be a dark turn, and then bam, it's Silk.
Well,
Yeah.
to me, I'll say what Ryan, to you saying that you think them not revealing her face means that they like whatever plans they have for her are far off. To me, low key, all that means is they just haven't found an actor to play her yet that they're satisfied.
That's what
with,
I was thinking too,
and that they very well could like have big plans for her in the next game, but they just don't. They haven't found somebody to play her yet. I absolutely love it. I hadn't even thought about it. I love the idea about her and Miles kind of being like the two for the DLC and swinging around and having fun and stuff. But that does seem like really soon. That seems a little bit premature, just because like we don't even know anything about. I mean, she's in this game for a quarter of a second, so it's like for her to be a central figure in the DLC seems great. But like you guys said, I trust y'all to that they're going to deliver her the backstory and everything that she's worthy of. But just to tag on what you guys said, or go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think we'll get more hints, kind of like in the when you beat the game in the previous game. Like we got some Miles moments, but it wasn't like you playing as Miles, right? It was just like subtle audio bits here and there that you get. I think at most in DLC in this game for the lifespan of this specific game, that's all we'll get.
Yeah, I agree. The only thing I'll add to what you guys all nailed everything future wise. The only thing I'll add, just to build on to a little bit of what I said earlier, I think we're going to get like in the next game. I do think the Spider Society in some way is going to play like, now this is a crazy hot take because this would be like a really, really big thing. But not only do I think the Spider Society is going to play like a pretty big part, I think we're going to go from being able to play as like 2 Spider-Men consistently in this game to like 3, 4, 5 in the next game, which is like really, really big. But then, this is like hot take corner. This is a, so it's not about like whether this is super likely or not, but I think the 3 other ones that we could get, obviously we're going to get Cindy, But I could definitely see like Spider Gwen and like Miguel too being two other ones that we get to play as, because it feels like too, especially if we're getting Cindy, they gotta like even the odds a little bit. Like give us Gwen now. It can't be a 2-on-1 thing. You got to give us and especially like I mean they mentioned Miguel, they bring Miguel in. It's like it can't be. You can't have 3 men and 1 woman. We got to like even the playing field a little bit. Like give us Spider Gwen. The people that would be like another crazy thing too. Like that I feel like with the multiverse stuff and given how big of a story she's like an equal main character in Across the Spider Verse. Across the Spider Verse is just as much Gwen's story as it is Miles. I mean, and I believe like Lord Miller said that too. So I don't know. Maybe they're just like opting not to go that direction because I mean, she's never even been mentioned or even really teased, or except she's got a spider bot. But I mean, so does everybody else. I don't really think that that means anything necessarily. But I don't know. Like I would love in the next game to get like a few more, even more Spider-Man. Like maybe give us Gwen and give us Miguel. Like, there's no reason not to give us an animated universe. Give us Gwen's universe. Just give us everything.
I love the take. The one place that I'll push back though is I don't think they can give us the same characters we see in Across the Spider-Verse because it'll be hard for people to buy in that this is the same one that we see in the movies, but with a different voice actor. And I don't think there's any way they'll be able to get Oscar Isaac and Haley Steinfeld. You can probably get Shamik Moore to do stuff. You absolutely can probably get Shamik Moore to come in and do another Miles cameo at the end of it or something like that. But I don't think you're getting Oscar Isaac and Haley Steinfeld to come in and like do a bunch of mocap.
Throw the bag at them. Throw the bag and get them. They can do it.
You can still do multiverse stuff, and it doesn't have to be Spider-Verse. Yeah. Like the Spider-Verse existed before the movies. You know, like Moreland is a thing. You know, that could he could genuinely be the real villain in the next game when you really want to go. Like you could do the Spider Totem route, which I never really liked, to be honest, because it's just kind of like it was like, oh, these are pinnacle points of the Spider people. I was like, yeah, whatever, everyone's a Spider-Man, whatever. But it's like you could go that route and have just one person, one vampire being essentially just going through just wrecking house.
Morbius?
Or Spider Carnage. Have it be a Spider Carnage where after Cletus Cassidy is defeated, you got to deal with the Spider Carnage, and it's a multiversal threat just like it was in the 90s. And that's how we bring in Spider Society. That's how we bring in multiple Spider-Men, is we all got to help band to fight the evil Spider-Man who's got the Carnage symbiote trying to destroy the entire universe. And that's how we could pull everything else in. But this is like Adam said, this is the hot take corner. So I keep wanting to fire it out. Let's build sort of our next game here. Let's build what Spider-Man 3 will look like, the 4th game, Spider-Man 3. Who knows if that's what it will be called, but we're gonna have Miles as the main Spider-Man. Peter is semi-retired, but obviously with the villains being Harry and or Norman Osborn in the next ones, there's no way he's sitting on the bench. He will be a primary feature. Maybe we have Silk. Maybe we have Chameleon. Maybe we have Wraith. Maybe we have Carnage. And we'll definitely have Green Goblin. How do we think this game is going to go? What do you guys think about the likelihood of my idea that it'll be a tier 1 Carnage and then we transition into Green Goblin? And then I agree with Adam. We get some Spider-Verse tie-ins here as well. Beginning with that sort of thread, and if you have a different idea, toss those out. But Adam, I'll go to you first for that sort of the thread we've created. Carnage, Goblins, Spider-Verse. What else do you think would make a great addition to this game? Or how should they pair those things?
Well, I mean, that's like those three are as good of a starting point as any. The thing that I think though that they have to do, like one of my favorite parts of this game is the expanded map with Queens and Brooklyn, like now having so much more space to explore and so many other things. But like, I don't think in the next game, and maybe they do, maybe they just say, you know what, this is a big enough map. But given that, you know, we see how strong the PS5 is, like Damien was talking about earlier, when you fast travel, it's not even a cutscene. It literally just happens. You literally just immediately appear like across the city, which is pretty incredible. So like, it leads me to think, like I said earlier, I think we've got to get 2 maybe 3. I wouldn't say like 10 or 12 or anything, but like I really can't see them giving us 2 to 3 different versions of Marvel's New York, like that we play as. Like one of them is like a 2099, like I said, version, and another one is like an animated version or something like that. Because it really wouldn't be all that. Like you could literally keep everything almost the exact same. Like you wouldn't have to recode and remake an entire city. You could kind of just like skin over it with like other things, especially for like animation. And I know that would still be a huge task. I'm not saying that would be easy, but still, it's not like you're building an entire like different place. Like it's not like if you made a new hero and you got to build an entire new a new location. Would still be Marvel's New York. The layout, the buildings, everything would be the same, but it's just kind of like skinned over with a different thing. That's my big prediction as far as the villains. I mean, it seems pretty spot on with that what you said. The only thing, not even another villain that I'm thinking, we have to get another. Who do you guys think we would be fighting in the beginning? Because both of these first 2 games that we fight Kingpin and Sandman. Like we open up with 2 iconic Spider-Man villains in the very first mission. And one I gotta say, we didn't talk about it much, but like the first mission in this game, just an all-time introduction. It was just the Sandman mission, absolutely incredible. But like, who could they give us that doesn't like necessarily tie into the main story, similar to how Fisk and Sandman didn't? I mean, like they both did a little bit. Like we get the Fisk construction sites, and then we get the Sandman crystals. But like other than that, those are pretty much just side activities. Like after they're the first main mission. So who could be another central feature, like the first villain, and then we kind of like maybe just do a little side. So who could be to tag on to the villains that you added, TJ, which I think are probably pretty spot on.
I'd be a little bit disappointed if that is just the villain that Craven is. Sorry, that Carnage is. If it's like,
Oh no!
oh, here you get to fight him as the Sandman now at the beginning, and that's it. I'd be so sad.
No
but I agree
way.
with you. I think they'll add in somebody brand new for that one. It would be even super cool if it was like Spot. Spot just appears and you got to fight him really quick, and then he disappears, and you're like, "What the fuck was that?" And then it's just like a tease onto the Beyond the Spider-Verse movie.
But then you fight him and like he pulls you through a couple of different dimensions.
Yeah.
And then you're like, wait a minute. And then you get to see like these quick teases of like an entire like animated New York. And then you're like, wait, is this going to be a thing? And then later in the game, you realize that it is. Bring us on to write Spider-Man 3, Insomniac. Make it happen.
Yeah, I've always felt like I could be a very great asset in a writer's room. Never a head writer, you know? I don't have head writer in me. But let me see your ideas and help me tweak them, and we'll come up with some theories. I've always wanted to do that. Ryan, what do you think of the ideas to date, and what are some other things you'd like to add into the new game, or what do you just think is coming next?
I think I think the multiversal side of things like has to be its own thing entirely, because that's such a big idea on its own that could be its own game, and it has been. Like Shattered Dimensions, that was its own game where like you played as 4 different Spider-Men in that one. So I think pushing that outside of like what Doc Ock calls the final chapter, which is interesting. I want to say it's the final chapter of this storyline, because I would hate for them to like kind of stop and focus on. I mean, yeah, there's Wolverine and stuff, but like I would still want to play with the Spider people. So I think, man, I wish they don't do the same thing that they did with this game and the first game, where it's like one villain throughout the most of it, and then here comes the next villain. Like I want them to remove themselves from that formula, try to actually do like a whole team up thing throughout the whole game. Like I felt like when Doc Ock let all the villains out in the first game, that whole section could have been something on its own, where you're like just fighting different villains, and like you see like all the prisoners out and everything. I thought that alone could have been something. But oh man, I I think Doc Ock and Green Goblin teaming up, that's going to be pretty interesting to see. Um, I think what would be cool is if what I want to see is like a Venom game spinoff from that one. I don't think we can get it from this game specifically, because Harry's pretty much comatose. The symbiote, for all we know, is kind of off him. So I would hope, like, let's say, one of Norman's final acts is like to give Harry the Green Goblin serum, but then I don't know, something were to arise where like that doesn't work. Carnage does something where Null has to come in, and then Harry gets like if we do a whole Spider Island kind of thing where it's just like different symbiote stuff, and we finally get different heroes coming in. I think that's how you change it up. Where it's like Web of Shadows, where we had a symbiote Wolverine, and we can just see that kind of take on it. I mean, it would be bold to do like a whole Spider Island thing, but I feel like that's what you do is like you kind of change up the world by having it venomized or symbiote like and make it look a little different. Um, and there's like structures of different venoms, or I don't know what Null does, but like if he terraforms New York in some way or another, I feel like that would be bonkers. But like that's how you change it to keep it still different, but within the same sandbox kind of feel. That's what I think. Because I feel like Null, like with the symbols, I think you did that for a reason. I think maybe Null is coming. I don't know how, but considering a lot of what we saw with Venom, with the wings and everything, I think that's kind of the route we might go in next.
It's tough to not galaxy brain this too much because they just tied it into Across the Spider-Verse. We have a Wolverine suit in it, and we know that the upcoming Wolverine game is going to be in the same universe. They show us Avengers Tower. The crumbs are there. Now, I admit WandaVision aerospace engineered myself a little bit when I heard Mary Jane go, "Oh, they gave the cover to some other new reporter at the Bugle." I totally thought that new reporter was going to be Eddie Brock, and then that was going to lead to an Eddie Brock Venom. And who knows, maybe it still could. But I don't think that type of line of thinking is too far-fetched with these games because they've shown us with, oh, we're playing as Venom now. Oh, shit, Venom just bit Craven's head off. Oh, here's a portal into the Spider-Verse. They're willing to do crazy things. Damon, where do you think they're going next with potentially the final Spider-Man game?
I hate to rain on everyone's parade right now. I genuinely think the Carnage storyline will be handled in a DLC. I think anything symbiote related will be handled in this game. I think anything outside of that, this game is the symbiote game. It already has everything built in there. It has every bit of UI and all the effects are already built into this game. It's done. If you make another game and you have symbiote and you have multiverse and you have Green Goblin, too much. It's literally too much for that game to have. I think everything symbiote related will be handled in this game. Done. Next game, we have already promised. You have to look at the actual clues that they have in the main story, right? Next game, they tease Goblin. So Goblin's going to be in the main story next game for sure, 100%. I do not want it to be Harry. I want it to be Norman.
Me too.
I want Harry to die. I'm sorry. I think it would hurt more for everyone because he finally became attached to him. And I think he's going to die, and that's what's going to make Norman take the serum himself. And then 2, the multiverse stuff. That's Cindy's kind of like foray. Cindy's big 2 things is multiverse and magic. Those are like, that's what separates her from every other spider person. Which is why I like her. She's my favorite spider person that isn't Black Cat. But I really
She's a
think
cat
that, like,
person, Damon. She's not a spider person. She's a cat person.
spider related, please. According to Sony. But I really think next game, honestly, we'll get like just Green Goblin and then the multiverse stuff will just completely break open. Whether they make their own thing, which I genuinely think they will with their own multiverse, their own Spider-Woman, their own whatever. We can see a superior Spider-Man scenario where we have that Doc Ock, taking over a Peter Brain, right? Like we can see that in that game, a version of that. And we already got a little bit of that tease where it's like, oh, the final chapter. It's like, yeah, okay, because maybe we could get a superior Spider-Man. That'd be cool. I think that's the most likely scenario because that on its own is its own story. You cannot put a multiverse thing in a DLC. Like that, that's crazy. But everything symbiote, I think the Craven stuff with Chameleon, like you mentioned, will probably be like a DLC thing. That makes sense. That's kind of like what they did with Tombstone. And then also Carnage will be handled in DLC. I think those will be the 2 big ones for this game.
If that's the case, I will say we're probably not getting a fourth game for at least 5 years, and those are going to be some big DLCs.
Yeah, agree. That was
I
like
don't
kind of
know
my
if we're
thought.
also
Is
going to
like,
get another like Miles Morales type of like 1.5 game or whatever in this. Like, I guess theoretically, if they did already have a Cindy in mind and build her up to have that type of game, they could do that. But that's not what it seems like already. Where you already have the actor in play, you already have the face, everything. Like that doesn't seem likely.
I
it does.
think.
All
Oh
right,
no,
go ahead,
sorry,
Ryan.
I didn't go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say too, the thing that's actually a really good point, Damon. And now that's kind of how I'm completely on board with that too, because it does seem like, I don't know, leaving the symbiote kind of in this thing with it, like especially all the coding. Like I didn't really think about it from that angle, but everything, like it would just be a lot to kind of work it all the way back into another game. And like this game being everything in this game, really except the main story, is like twice as big in scope as like the first game. And then Miles Morales is obviously more. It really feels more like an expanded DLC, which I think it was originally designed to be, if I'm not mistaken. But like since this game is so much bigger, I can see us getting like two, like, because the DLC, the Magia DLC in the first game, it's pretty, in my opinion, it's pretty underwhelming. Like it was cool to get some extra stuff, but it was pretty underwhelming to me, and it was also like really really short. I think like each part in the 3 parts was like 3 or 4 missions, and that was it. Like it was only like an hour or two long, like each part. Like I can see them actually building out like a really fleshed out DLC, kind of like you said, TJ, and then we maybe like they work on this for like the next 2 years or something like that, and then we don't end up getting another like Spider-Man 4 or whatever they do next for 5 or
Till
6
well
more years.
after Wolverine. Like we might get Spider-Man DLCs, Wolverine and Wolverine DLCs before the next Spider-Man game.
Oh, that just makes me sad to think about. I mean, I'm excited for Wolverine because I cannot wait to see what they cook up for that. But this is not a Wolverine podcast. I could have a whole podcast on the things I want to see out of a Wolverine game. But that actually makes a lot of sense. I can see, and it does seem like that would be too big for one DLC, like Carnage and the Chameleon. So I can see maybe like 2 whole separate big DLCs, one Carnage and one the Chameleon. I'm sure, and they could like that just would tie in so easily. That works so much. That works so much better. Oh, I mean, I'm in. Damon, you sold me. I'm in on that. I'm in.
Yeah, I have to agree. Like once you brought that point up, I was like, you know what? Because like if you think about it, the flame mission is not at all tied to anything main story. Like it's completely its own side thing. You could have easily missed it. You could have not even completed it, and then for them to introduce that in the next game, you're like, what the fuck is this? Like where did this come from? So yeah, man, it's sad that's what Carnage will be quote unquote reduced to. But let's say for example that, like, I mean, there is a finality to the Carnage DLC, but like that could lead us into if they make a Venom side game eventually, like where there's kind of like a loose thread with the symbiote or no something, where that could be like, because I mean, there's no way that you're not gonna make a Venom game after what you just gave us in this game. Like you clearly like did a
The
backdoor
template's
pilot.
there.
Yeah, exactly. And
they made an entire fight set, like an entire move set for a character you play with for like 25 minutes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There's no way
that was so fun too, man. I felt like the freaking Hulk running around.
That was so cool. I could not. My jaw was on the floor that entire sequence. Like I was like, oh, I can't believe this is fucking happening right now.
Just totally overpowered.
Infinite heals, parrying ranged attacks. Like that was just everything was like so cool. It felt so overpowered.
Right, just like grabbing people and just using them to hit other people. It's like,
which honestly, from a storytelling perspective too, makes it's so well done because both Harry and Peter, when they had the Venom suit on, they had the same feel. Like, man, this is great. I feel so I've never been more powerful. I could take over the world. So it's like you get that feeling too, even like when you're playing.
When I was Venom, I was sitting there like, kill them all, rip their heads off, and like I don't even have the symbiote voice in my head.
I'm glad you mentioned the Peter having the symbiote because that brought up one of my and TJ and Ryan. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. This is one of my very minor complaints, and I know this would have taken extra work to do, but it was really jarring when I'm in the Peter symbiote version of the game, and like I just finished a crime, and he's like, "Be thankful you can still walk," and I swing away, and then I go help a side mission, and he's like, "Oh hey, thanks so much, I'm so happy," and I'm like, "Wait, what? You were just ready to bite somebody's head off 30 seconds ago." And I was like, these missions, I felt like I know it would have been this grand thing to do, but I'm like, record extra dialogue for those because I was
At
like,
least put them on
oh
lock.
my god,
At least put them
right?
on lock during a
Yes.
certain period of time. That would make
Yeah,
more sense. That's
because
easier.
it was like really jarring when he's literally telling people like, "Oh, I should have killed you" or something like that, and then he goes to help this old man in the park, and I'm like, this is just not like on the same timeline right now. That was like, it was a minor complaint, like it didn't say anything that bothered me, but I was like, oh man, they could have either put it on lock, record new dialogue or something, because that was actually like that was really funny.
Yeah, they definitely should have done something to shore that up a little bit. I did want to shout out the voice acting. If you're watching us on YouTube, if you are, hit that like button, subscribe, hit the notification bell. But you can also see the autograph Miles Morales pop with Najee Jeter, who of course voices him. He was incredible. Yuri Lowenthal, who voices Peter, was just spectacular. That editing stuff was hilarious. But like when he was doing his symbiote work, he clearly was tapping into that 90s animated series Spider-Man with obviously there's the iconic "Shocker! I'll chase you to the ends of the earth!" And that's kind of what Yuri was giving the entire time in the symbiote suit. And the one I thought was the most funny by far, of all the like shit talking he's doing, is when you're fighting the lizard, which we didn't even fucking talk about because there was so much craziness in this game. But when you're fighting the lizard and he's like, "Connors, no wonder your family left you." And it's just like, it was so funny, especially because like I kept dying like right after that part. Like the lizard just kept like, I hadn't figured out that you need to parry and not dodge yet. And so the lizard kept fucking my shit up. And so on loop, I was just getting, "No wonder your family left you," over and over and over again. And it was just absolutely hilarious stuff. Ryan, I want to throw it to you first. Where does this rank for you? You don't have to give it a specific number, but just like better than this, worse than this. Where does it rank for you among superhero games? And where does it rank for you among the video games you've played?
Ooh, okay. I mean, the easiest comparison is like the Arkham franchise.
Yeah.
I would say it story wise, it is better than all of them. Combat wise, honestly, almost all around, it's better. I think the one thing that's missing from Spider-Man 2, which it's kind of weird how it worked, where the Mysteriums, Miles gets to redo those. But Peter doesn't get like a thing like that where you get to just have like a challenge map where you get to just fight off waves of enemies. I think that's the one thing that's kind of lacking from these games, is having that thing that the Arkham games have, where you have like just challenge maps where you do stealth or you do like just waves of combat. I think that's something that these games kind of need, especially with the abilities that they're throwing in, and like the Venom, the symbiote abilities with Peter. So I think if it has that, it's a perfect game for me. In terms of other video games, I think it's pretty much up there. I think like out of the games that I've like completed fully platinum, like it's really only the Spider-Man games that I felt that need to actually do it and like feel like good about actually completing it and like wanting to do it, instead of feeling like, oh, this is just a chore to do the platinum, because some of the missions are just freaking impossible. Um, so I think, like in terms of enjoyment and just overall like mechanics and story, I think this is probably one of my favorite games of all time in general. I would say maybe like the God of War, the recent PlayStation God of War games kind of are right there. But I think for me, as a fan of Spider-Man and like seeing what they've accomplished in just 3 games, and the potential future of what they could do, it's like they're clearly just scratching the surface of like, and that's one thing we haven't even talked about too, where like this takes the power of the PlayStation to a whole nother level, where like this is like feels next gen, even with the DualShock controllers. Like the haptic feedback with like when you're doing the Prowler missions as Miles and you like hold down L2 R2 and like that release it just feels so smooth. I don't know. I just feel like I've never felt that kind of experience with any other game where like the controller feels next gen. It feels like this whole different experience. So yeah, I'm probably my favorite game. One of my favorite games of all time. It might take a couple of replays, but like I think it's pretty high up there for me.
And before I forget about it, that's the one thing I will say is for those that are kind of similar to Damon, and the story is my favorite part too. And so if you kind of have the time when you're playing this game, I do very recommend completing all the side stuff because it's not like Miles Morales or the first Spider-Man game where it's just like you complete it for an achievement or a percentage. Every single side story directly ties into cutscenes and gives you like an important closure on a story. And so like the chameleon thing, that was it for the droids, but like for the drones, but each of them actually had those. Adam, I want to throw it to you next because I feel like you have a bit of a similar perspective to Ryan, where it's like you guys have both played a lot of games on the PS5 and the PS4, whether it be God of War, Star Wars, Last of Us, Uncharted, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They go on forever. I don't quite have that same background. But then I feel like Damon, you have a different one than these two that's maybe a bit similar to mine in terms of our gaming histories. So Adam, I'm interested in how you would compare it to the other superhero games you've played, and then also the God of War style, Red Dead Redemption style games for PlayStation 4 and 5.
Yeah, so I'm glad you brought up those two games in particular. First off, for just superhero games, I won't mince words. This is by far the best superhero game I've ever played. For me personally, and I love the Arkham games. I love the previous two Spider-Man games. I love all three of the Arkham games. I love the old Spider-Man games, but this is just like far and away as good as it gets. And now it's like it's kind of hard to compare to some of the older games because so much of what I love about this game, like you said, Ryan, is amplified by the fact that I'm playing on like the highest powerful, like the most powerful console. Like not obviously not considering like a PC, but I mean just like the quality and everything is top notch. But when it comes to story, like you said, I've played. I've always been a single player. I mean, I love my my Call of Duties and stuff like that. Or at least I used to. Apex, Battle Royales, all that stuff. But I've always been a big fan of single player games. And if I'm going to stack this story one to one up with somebody else, with like some of these other games that I've played, it's definitely not one. And it's incredible, but I would definitely not put it at one. That's just such a good question that you told me before I would have to be answering, and I've been thinking about it still throughout the whole show, and it's still hard for me to put a good list that I'm satisfied of. For one, I think for me will always be Red Dead Redemption 2. I've just never, and I think that is to me maybe the best story in any medium, not even like just video games. Like I think start to finish it's as good of a story as I've ever experienced in movies, TV, gaming, anything like that. And then I'd probably say also Ghost of Tsushima is a really, really underrated story and like a really, really great game with just like the way it develops and kind of it's really unique in where it develop. I won't spoil that for anybody that hasn't played it, but the way it develops, it forces you, not necessarily forces you, but like to change your play style as you go along, that it fits with the narrative in like a really, really unique way. That's just like, it's something that's never been done in a game before, and they pull it off excellently. But I'm not here to talk about all these other games and what I love about them so much. I'm here to put this into a list. So I'll say I'm gonna put Red Dead Redemption up at the top. I'm gonna put there's four franchises that I'll put ahead of this and ahead of Spider-Man just in terms of the story, and it would be Red Dead Redemption, Ghost of Tsushima, The Last of Us, and God of War are four franchises that I think the story, just like overall in terms of like a really well fleshed out narrative, and that's not. I don't want people to hear that and think, oh, this is like what a loser he's putting in it. Like fifth is still really good. I've played hundreds of video games. Like fifth is still like top 1.1%. That's like as good as it gets. But it's just like, and now if I combine it with gameplay, it's probably a little higher up on that list because like I think I combine it with gameplay. This probably is one of my favorite games of all time, just because I mean the gameplay is so much fun with like the combat and the traversal and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm gonna put it at 5 for the main story. But as far as Superman or superhero games goes, this is as good as it gets. And I want to call back real quickly too to like Damon said earlier. This gives us so much potential, and we also talked about this, Ryan. You and I did a little bit. And I think we talked about it in the group chat. Just the mechanics they have established in this game, and the Fisk Tower in this game is now like the Baxter Building, the Fantastic Four, and it's like all this. We literally have with the symbiote stretching stuff. We have stretching things. We have flying. We have invisibility. That's like
you can do fire the same way you do electricity, just with a different animation.
Exactly, and we also, the more I think about it, it wouldn't even really be that hard to code like the Thing and the rock stuff directly off a Tombstone. You just punch him and nothing like the way it feels when you punch one of those guys, like in the first game, like very distinct when you punch a regular. Like they literally have everything they need. Now, I'm not going to ask too much of Insomniac. I know they're already working on more Spider-Man stuff. They're working on Wolverine. I'm not going to be like, hey guys, go ahead and give us a Fantastic Four game too. Like I'm not going to get greedy, but just this unlocks potential for so much more stuff, which factors in that stuff too. But I mean, it's undoubtedly one of the 5 to 10 best video games I've ever played. I'm kind of, like not even just superhero. It's the best superhero game, and undoubtedly for me one of the 5 to 10 best video games I've ever played for sure.
So what this game I think does so well, and maybe better than any game I've seen, and the reason I notice it so much is because like I've played a lot of sports games before. I've done a lot of 2K, a lot of Madden. And what frustrates me is as they try and improve those games, they just start over and try new things, and then the other things they'll keep exactly the same, and they won't change for 8 years at a time. So what Spider-Man 2 is, and I'll shout out to our other co-host who's not with us right now because he doesn't have a PlayStation, Garrett, because he's the one who like he pointed this out pretty aggressively when the first one came out. But this is just essentially the first Batman Arkham games taken to the absolute fucking perfection of game making with new consoles. And so it's why it's difficult to compare sports from very, very different eras. Where if you look at something like basketball, where Wilt Chamberlain has the record for the most points in the history of the NBA with 100 points in a single game, which is basically impossible to do now because there's different rules. It's a totally different game, much like one of my favorite games of all time is Super Mario Brothers for the Super Nintendo. Obviously, I can't compare Super Mario Brothers to Spider-Man 2 because it's a totally different game. And I feel like that's the case with this as well. And what Spider-Man 2 did so well is take the other things that similar games have done well and perfect them. If something doesn't work, we're going to get rid of it. And then we're going to take the things that work and absolutely perfect them. And I thought that was very interesting. Damon, what did you think? Where would you kind of rank it compared to the games you've played? Because I feel like me, a lot more in the Nintendo side of things, a lot of Pokemon. I feel like Ryan, we're on one side. I feel like we kind of, this group is almost kind of like a spectrum with that, where it's like Damon's right here, big on like the Switch Pokemon games, and then it switches to me, and then Ryan's still in that range. Adam kind of not at all, but Ryan's also way more on the PS5 range than me and Damon are, kind of thing. I feel like we're a bit of a spectrum. If I falsely categorize somebody, then I apologize. But anyways, Damon, what did you think?
Man, this game was it was an absolute delight. Garrett's gonna kill me. I am so sorry, but you know what I have to compare this with, because you say superhero games, right?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed the Avengers game, as I have said many times, and it's because of the story. I like the story in that game. The story in this game is much better. But I just wanted to point it out. I had that on a I liked it type of realm because of the story. You get into the multiplayer, everything else, it became a train wreck after that for a lot of people, and I understand. But it was a story that got me through it, and it's a story that connected me to this game. That's where I enjoy my games, is to feel connected to what they're trying to tell. And I thought they did an excellent job. It is very difficult to compare, as you said. Like, how am I going to compare this with like
to Pokemon Legends
Emerald
Arceus
or something?
Yeah.
Right, like that. Like, also talk about franchises that famously have horrendous stories. Like, you are not in a Pokemon game for a story. Let me tell you that. I think Ryan will agree with me there. You are not into that for a story. If you get a good story in a Pokemon game, man, that is like, regardless.
I was gonna say, like, Pokemon Legends Arceus, best Pokemon game ever.
Best
It needs
story.
voice acting. Yeah, see,
Yeah.
it needs voice acting though. That's the
also
one thing the
proves it,
franchise
man.
needs.
Mhm.
Like, once,
Anyway.
yeah. Anyways, that's a whole
Anyway,
other podcast.
but that also is part of the storytelling too. Is the voice acting was so good. The facials in this were excellent for the most part. Were very, very good. I felt like every emotion they were trying to tell me and have me feel, I felt too, and it just like I connected to it in every way. The other game I could probably compare it with, if you wanted me to compare it to, is like a Jedi Fallen Order type of thing, because these are two franchises too.
Mhm.
I'm already deeply connected to, and I deeply care about with characters I already like. I put this one ahead of like the Fallen Order sequel.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I would too. I would put it above Jedi Survivor as much as I absolutely adore Jedi Survivor. The one thing that I think my favorite game, now obviously this is the gameplay of this is a billion times better. And I think the story is arguably better too, but I think my favorite game that I played so far for on PlayStation, and it's a remaster, it's not even a PlayStation 5 game, it's The Witcher 3 The Wild Hunt. And what that game does for me so much that I adore is the fact that the choices you make provide different consequences. And that was, I think, obviously this game is a billion times better than any Xbox 360 game, but the first Marvel Ultimate Alliance game, that's what I loved about it so much, is like the closing cutscenes would be totally different depending on how you played. And I love that. I just love the idea that like it's not it's a great story, but I have impact on the story. That will forever kind of be my favorite thing within video games. And so I think if they added that in the next game, that would be like the way to put this far and away as like the best game ever for me. If it's like, oh, I have a choice to rip this symbiote suit off if I hammer X, or I can not, or if I don't, if I just leave it, I'm gonna keep it on and I'm gonna do a bunch of bad shit. That's so fun because then I'm in the moment going like, well, what would I do? Should I do it? Do I not? And that is my favorite aspect of games. And so that would be one way to, I think I could level it up, but it's definitely the best superhero game I've ever played. It's much like, aside from maybe that adding in that choices aspect, I just find like it takes everything from the Spider-Man games before it, everything from the Batman Arkham style fightings, bring it to a new gen, optimize it, take parts of the best stories of comics and animation, adapt them so they're different while still keeping the important things that maintain true to the character. It was just incredible the way that they did all of those things. Anyone have any last closing comments on Spider-Man 2 before we get out of here? We obviously still have Loki to record later today. Episode 4 you can find on the Agents of Fandom podcast feed, as well as our YouTube channel. And you can also find Damon's Comic Corner on our YouTube channel as well, where him and AF Parker just put up a great new episode about what is new in DC, upcoming solicits, a bunch of crazy things going on over there. I didn't get a chance to see Damon, so I'll throw it to you first for closing thoughts and where the people can find you on socials. But did you guys have a chance to dive in at all to the new Spider-Man Ultimate covers that came out yesterday, where they are fully revealing now, like, this is basically Peter B. Parker. He's got a daughter. He's got the little gut. He's got the little beard. And they're actually letting Peter be a happy middle-aged man.
Yeah, so I mentioned on the episode that you guys can check out on the YouTube channel. That was actually teased to us at New York Comic Con. I put a tweet out there. I don't think it caught any fire about that, but maybe, that's fine too. But yeah, Ultimates are back. The Ultimate World is back, and he did specifically say that this Peter Parker, this iteration of it, is a little bit influenced by Peter B. Parker, which is pretty cool because this is, even the Spider-Man editor Nick Lowe, who, right now is kind of infamously known as a guy who is just screwing with Peter's life and has split up him and MJ and has Paul in the mix now and all this stuff. God, fucking Paul. But it's really cool. So you can check it out. We really discussed everything kind of going on in the future. Solicit season's always fun. It's once a month. You get to see what's coming up in the future. And we chatted about our favorite comics that have been coming out the last few weeks.
Ryan, where can the people find you on socials outside of just absolutely making sure we have the most pristine and beautiful feeds in all of the industry?
Thank you. You can find me at Ryan Reflex on Twitter and Letterbox. Ryan underscore Reflex. If you do not put the underscore, you will find a optometrist. So just make sure there's a clear difference between us. Yeah, no, this is great to talk about the game. One last thing I want to bring up, we talked about it briefly, was like the mocap actors. I know a lot of people had problems with like the new Peter mocap actor, but I think this game especially showed like his range, like physically, like getting to see that range. I know Adam and I talked about this briefly, where like that line he says to Harry of like, "You're gonna pop some pills before," I forgot what he said, but like where he's like
He's
angry
like,
at
pop
Harry.
some more
He's
pills and say how you really feel.
yeah, I was like, God damn, like the look of this Peter, like he just looks so timid, but like hearing him say that line, it's like fuck, like damn, okay, you know what? Yeah, this is a good, like, you know, credit to the actors who made this game, because like they're you know, it's more than just a voice, it's really your face as well. So yeah,
That's exactly it. And I mean, shout out to our guy Roger Clark, the mocap actor for in Red Dead Redemption 2. Apologies, I'm brain farting the main character's name. Arthur Morgan. Yes, nailed it. He's very active on Twitter, kind of reminding people that it's like, hey, we're doing more than just voice acting, people. This is full on acting. Like, we are doing everything here. And so it's like the whole crew, but especially Yuri Lowenthal and Najee Jeter, they both absolutely crushed it. Adam, hit me with your closing thoughts before we get out of here.
Yeah, well, Ryan, quickly too, I want to say I'm glad you brought up Ben Jordan, and I want to give him a special shout out because he has received, in my opinion, just far too much, like a ridiculous amount of hate since he took over as like the main mocap actor. And I mean, I know like people had a lot of complaints with it with the Spider-Man remaster, which I thought was a little bit ridiculous because all they did was kind of paint his face over like another person's performance. And now, like you said, he got the chance to do it all himself in this game, and he was absolutely phenomenal. Him paired with Yuri's voice was great. The last thing I want to say that we didn't get a chance to talk about at all, if I can remember correctly, the suits and like the new styles and everything. I want to give a shout to that too, because that was another thing that when I saw in some of the trailers, I was like, this looks kind of goofy. Like, I feel like these variants look silly. And then I like unlocked some of them and started using them. I'm like, okay, there's some like really, really cool variants in here. And some of them, like I'm on my second playthrough right now, and I'm discovering